This aptitude test will determine your platoon assignment. Do your best.
Yes, sir.
Scarlet Nexus is the latest action RPG from developer and publisher Bandai Namco. It pulls influence from character action games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, as well as traditional JRPGs like Persona and even Bandai Namco's own Tales series. The story of Scarlet Nexus can feel a little scattered and unfocused at times, but its fun and satisfying combat is more than enough to keep you hooked until the very end.
Now we're talking. Hope you're ready to see how strong I am.
The world of Scarlet Nexus is under constant threat from monsters called the Others. These oddly deformed creatures randomly fell from the sky years ago with a hunger for human brains. In the years since, a military organization called the Others Suppression Force, or the OSF, was formed to fight this threat. The OSF is comprised of soldiers with powers strong enough to fight back the Others. Scarlet Nexus is a dual protagonist story following two OSF cadets, Yuito Sumeragi and Kasane Randall. Both share the same power of psychokinesis but couldn't have more opposite personalities. Yuito is cheerful and kind, if not a little naive. Kasane, on the other hand, is a little more curt and avoids small talk whenever possible. Each character has their own separate campaign that provides unique perspectives on generally the same story. It's difficult to talk about the story of Scarlet Nexus because it has so many wild twists and turns, and I wouldn't dare spoil it for you. I will say, however, that whatever you think the game is about, you're probably wrong. I know I had my own expectations going in, and after playing the demo, I wasn't even close. But don't worry, that ends up being a good thing. My main criticism of the story is that it felt unfocused. There are a lot of characters and diverging plot threads, and it can be hard to keep track of everything in your head. New plot points often come out of nowhere, which can give you a feeling of whiplash. There's also a lot of made-up jargon that the game attempts to reinforce often, but by the end there were still a few things that I didn't fully understand. I think if Scarlet Nexus cut out some of its many plot threads, it would have made for a tighter, more focused story. What also hurts the story in some ways to me was the visual novel style presentation. I remember being really taken aback when I experienced this for the first time in the demo, and I never really got used to it. The game attempts to spice this up with a stylized aesthetic, however, it never felt more than a slideshow for me. There were quite a few moments that were clearly meant to tug on your heartstrings, but just fell completely flat for me. There are moments when Scarlet Nexus has a more traditional style for cutscenes, but they're often short and infrequent. I'm not sure if this was a style choice or meant to save on budget, but if Scarlet Nexus ever gets a sequel, Bandai Namco should strongly consider dropping this visual novel style presentation. Thankfully, the characters more than make up for this with their charm. They all have such distinct personalities that really stand out and maybe a little tropey at times. You'll spend so much time with them through the story and intermission episodes at your hideout that by the time the credits roll, you'll feel a genuine sense of connection. At its core, Scarlet Nexus is an action RPG, and in a lot of ways, it plays unlike any game I've ever played before. Each character has a basic string of attacks that are core to the game's combat system. Kasane is more of a ranged character using psionic knives, while Yuito is more of a close-range fighter that devastates enemies with his sword. Personally, I preferred Yuito as his attacks felt faster and more impactful. The idea of Kasane's combat style is cool, but I often felt like I was missing or not hitting enemies in a way that I expected. Another core component of combat is Yuito and Kasane's shared psychokinesis power. Littered throughout levels are objects that you can pick up and hurl at enemies. This can range from small pots to large construction equipment and even subway trains. What's neat about this power is that it's mapped to the shoulder button, so you can throw objects while simultaneously wailing away on enemies with your melee weapons. It can take a bit of time to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's oh so satisfying. You can't use this power endlessly though, as you have a meter that depletes whenever you use it. You can easily refill it though with a particular strong attack. I actually like this as it gives combat a nice flow instead of feeling spammy. The cherry on top of this delicious combat sundae is the ability to use your teammates' powers. Kasane and Yuito's teams have different sets of powers, and depending on whose story you're playing, you'll have a different loadout of 4 powers for the majority of the game. Each team has a nice variety of abilities that are useful for both exploration and combat, but personally I preferred Kasane's team. They have powers like invisibility, duplication, and the ability to slow down the enemy's movement. These powers felt like they comboed really well together, especially later in the game when you're able to activate more than one power at a time. Yuito's team has powers like teleportation, clairvoyance, and temporary invincibility. There are some cool moments utilizing these powers, but again in terms of their usefulness in combat, I much preferred Kasane's team. When all aspects of combat are unlocked and you're getting the hang of it, it feels so great. It almost feels rhythmic in some ways, as there are patterns you follow to defeat certain enemies. The combat truly shines when there are a large variety of enemies in an arena. The mental gymnastics of who to fight in what order and what you need to do to beat them feels so satisfying when executed properly. I have to give special nod to the sound design team. There are great audio cues for when abilities are ready and when enemy shields are broken and ready to be finished off.
It's down. Let's finish it.
I'll do it. Check.
Your brain map helps Scarlet Nexus from ever feeling stale. As you level up, you'll earn points that you could spend within the Brain Amp to unlock and enhance skills. These can range from unlocking multiple air dashes to activating 4 powers at once. New branches will open up as the game goes on, adding even more layers to combat. I was unlocking new skills up until the very end of the game, so even when you think you might settle into a particular combat flow, there's always new things to try. In between story missions, you have intermission episodes where your team will take time to rest at your hideout. Here you can buy new equipment, explore the world, take on side missions, or interact with your teammates. Despite what it might seem from trailers, Scarlet Nexus is a fairly linear game with most combat levels being hallways with small branches. These intermission episodes are nice because it allows you to stretch a little bit to explore the city. It's fun to look at, but there really isn't much to do besides pick up items and do side quests. The side quests mostly involve defeating enemies using certain powers or collecting a number of items. I did a few just to see what they were like, but fairly quickly I stopped bothering because the rewards really weren't worth the time. Probably the most worthwhile activity during intermission episodes are bond episodes. In bond episodes, you'll get to know a little more about your teammates, much like in Persona's social link system. You can also give your teammates gifts, which enhances your bond level with them. Once your bond level increases, you'll unlock useful combat skills like being able to borrow teammates' powers for longer periods of time, or strengthening those powers. The episodes themselves weren't always the most compelling, but the rewards were well worth it, so I always took the time to do them. One other fun but totally optional aspect of Scarlet Nexus is adding visual flair to your team. These could range from different color schemes to cat ears. I found that most of these pieces didn't look very good on characters, so I didn't use too many of them. The other part of the system that really bothered me was how you couldn't tell what these pieces looked like until you bought them. There was simply no way to try them on. I had to guess what they looked like based on the name of the item, and I found myself disappointed more often than not. Depending on how much you like customizing your characters in games, your mileage will certainly vary with this system, and you could have a much better time with it than I did. From top to bottom, Scarlet Nexus has a stylish flair that's hard to ignore. The overall muted color scheme and use of red really gives the game a unique look. The game style also extends to the combat. The way characters flash in when you borrow their powers feels cool and snappy. I particularly enjoyed the finishing move animations. They give the combat a dynamic feel and never take too long to interrupt your flow. I played Scarlet Nexus on a PlayStation 4, and while I never had frame rate problems, the game begs to be running at 60 frames per second. The combat is so fast and stylish that it feels wrong to be playing it at an inferior frame rate. If you have the option, definitely play this on a PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, or a powerful PC. The music of Scarlet Nexus also deserves particular praise. Its mix of high-energy electronica and rock suit the game so well. You'll have suitably chill tracks when exploring the city and epic music for boss fights. I don't always find myself listening to game music outside of the game itself, but I did here. If you enjoyed what you've heard in this review so far, then be sure to find the Scarlet Nexus soundtrack on YouTube and give it a listen. I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as I did. New franchises don't always nail it with their first outing, but Scarlet Nexus absolutely has. Its stylish presentation and silky smooth combat never got old for me during my 25 hours playing through Kasane's story, nor the several hours I spent with Yuito. The story can feel a little unfocused at times, but thankfully the strong cast of characters more than make up for any shortcomings. If you love games with exciting combat, then you absolutely shouldn't skip out on Scarlet Nexus. Now if you want to hear about more JRPGs worth your time and money, click into this playlist right here. It's all of my most recent reviews, and I know you'll find something awesome to play. If you enjoyed this review and want more like it, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.